Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Movement is Medicine, Tips for Living with Kidney Disease. My name is Mike Brody, and I'm the Manager of Community Programs for the Kidney Foundation of Canada, Southern Alberta branch. Now, I would like to introduce you, your moderator for today's webinar, Jill Goth, Manager of Programs and Public Policy at the Southern Alberta branch of the Kidney Foundation.
Hello, and thank you to everyone for joining us today on this very important topic, Movement is Medicine, Tips for People Living with Kidney Disease. Before we begin, we would like to recognize the Indigenous land that we are on, inspired by the 94 recommendation call to action made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Land acknowledgements are a necessary first step in honoring the original occupants of a place. They also help Canadians to recognize and respect Indigenous peoples' inherent kinship beliefs when it comes to the land, especially since those beliefs were restricted for so long. And as we gather here today, I would like to acknowledge that I'm located in Calgary, Alberta, which is the traditional territory of the peoples of the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta, which include the Blackfoot Nation tribes of Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations tribe of Chiniki, Bearspaw, Wesley, and Tsuut'ina First Nation. And the city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Recognizing that we all work and live in various places and that you may be joining us from a different territorial and traditional Indigenous territory, I encourage everyone to take a moment to reflect on that and acknowledge it. If you know the territory in which you are situated, I invite you to acknowledge that in the chat. The information shared in today's online seminar is current as of today, October 12th, 2022. The material shared in this presentation is not intended to be medical advice. You should speak to your doctor or care team about your own individual situation. The information is intended for a Canadian audience. Throughout the presentation, you'll be seeing resources and links to various pages. We'll post these in the chat, but you can also take a picture of them with your phone on the screen. And if you miss them for some reason, you can always go back to the recording of this webinar, which will be available on our website at kidney.ca. The Kidney Foundation would like to thank our sponsors for making the 2022 webinar series possible: GlaxoSmithKline, Horizon, Janssen, Otsuka, Paladin, and Takeda. So now we're thrilled to introduce our speakers, and we sincerely thank them for being here to share this valuable information today. So first, we have Nancy Verdin, and Nancy has been a kidney patient for 34 years. She initially had a crash start on hemodialysis. She's had experience with peritoneal dialysis, 3 transplants, and has been treated with both in-center and home hemodialysis. Her passion is helping find a way to bring wellness and recovery to people with all types of chronic kidney disease. And as a patient partner, Nancy has had the opportunity to speak for people living with all stages of chronic kidney disease with the perspective of seeing dialysis and chronic kidney disease as a way of life that can be supported by being physically and mentally active. Teresa Cohen. Teresa has worked as a kinesiologist with kidney patients for the last 4 years. She specializes in early mobility programs for inpatients and rehabilitation for people waiting for a kidney transplant. Teresa feels very lucky to work with a great team of nephrologists who collaborate to improve kidney patients' function and quality of life. And Dr. Jen McCrae. Jen is a professor at the Cummings School of Medicine and Department of Cardiac Sciences at the University of Calgary. As medical director for Alberta Kidney Care South, she works to develop innovative clinical programs to improve the quality of life of people living with kidney disease. Her clinical and research interests include improving the experience during the transition to dialysis and incorporating exercise to reduce symptom burden. She's a firm believer in health and wellness and loves to work out, walk her dogs, and hang out with her family and friends. So now I will pass the presentation to Dr. McRae.
Thank you for the introductions. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I just wanted to take a minute to highlight that our presentation today is brought to you by a diverse group of individuals, including people living with kidney disease themselves, kidney exercise specialists, kidney researchers, and kidney doctors. And we really hope that, with this presentation, you're going to be able to take away some really practical tips regarding how to incorporate physical activity and exercise into your world. Next slide, please. So this is what we're really hoping to kind of walk you through today. We want to introduce the concept that movement should really be thought of as medicine. And in order to do that, we're going to walk you through some of the physical, the mental health, and social benefits of physical activity. In addition, we want to take a few minutes to kind of explore what kinds of physical activity that people living with kidney disease could be doing. And we want to hear from some of our patient partners on how they've managed to incorporate it into their lifestyle. And finally, we hope to leave you with some key messages and some very key resources that we hope you'll find useful. But before I pass it over to Nancy, can I get, yes, thank you, the next slide. We wanted to take a poll and find out, if your kidney program actually has a dedicated exercise specialist or not. So if you guys could please take a minute to vote, that would be great. So we did suspect probably that the majority don't have an exercise specialist. We really hope that that's something that's going to change in the future, and we're going to circle back to this. So thanks, everyone, and I'm going to pass you over to Nancy.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so next slide, please. So we're going to start off with a question, and this is just to get you in mindset as to what is activity and how you can incorporate it. So the first question is, which of the following is an example of physical activity? Please put your answer in the chat box. And I want you to think about writing things down, because I'm hoping that you're going to go back to it at a later date and reflect on and think about what you could be doing, or perhaps even enjoying what you are doing right now. All right. So first of all, you'll note that it's likely very straightforward that laying in bed is generally not considered an activity or an exercise. And the neat part, though, is that you can do exercises laying in bed, and it might be sometimes the best place to start if you're just getting moving. The others, getting dressed, household chores, walking your dog, and biking, probably seem pretty natural to you. Although many people don't think of getting dressed as activity, it actually provides great range of motion and is a great place to start when you're just getting started or you've been ill for some time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is the difference between physical activity and exercise? Well, physical activity is any voluntary body movement produced by skeletal muscles, so your general muscles, and require energy expenditure. And that's just about everything that you do, except perhaps sitting in a chair or laying in bed. Exercise, on the other hand, is actually a category of physical activity. It's planned, structured, repetitive, and purposely focused on physical fitness. So the neat part about that one is that you are doing repetition, and you can do that with everyday activity as well. So the key message I want to send home with this slide is that participation in any activity is good and useful. So that means that when you look at your schedule and go, I don't have time to exercise, all those things you do every day, and you can see by the pictures that includes doing dishes, vacuuming, mopping, can be making beds, getting dressed in the morning, bathing, all those everyday activities you do actually really count to help building a good, healthy condition. Exercise and physical activity, we're really trying to make it part of the routine medical care so that it's something that you think about just as much as you need to take your medications, that physical activity and exercise becomes so automatic that you're building a sense of physical fitness, that you can do everyday things more easily, and that you are actually moving more. And we know that every movement counts, so you can start really small and work your way up. Next slide, please. So I want you to take a moment and I want you to write down all the activities that you're currently doing, or those that you might want to do. And you'll notice on the pictures that they're all activities of daily living. So things that you do every day. And I think it's important to recognize this, that we forget that everyday activity really matters. And actually, the more we do, the better we are. And on a really interesting point is that often if you find yourself falling asleep in a chair, that getting up and moving can help wake your body up, get you more involved, and change in position, which is good for your body as a whole. So next slide, please. Okay, so now we would like to hear from video number 1. And this is why you participate in exercise and how physical activity has helped manage kidney disease. And our video is going to answer, these are people that are doing it on a regular basis, and they're going to help us understand how they do that. Cue video, please.
My name is Mike Rogers, and I've been living with kidney disease since September 1983. At the moment, I'm on the transplant list, but I have not had a transplant as yet. So in the interim, I'm on peritoneal dialysis. I've been on peritoneal dialysis since August of 2019.
I was living with kidney disease for about 7 or 8 years. I had a transplant 2 years ago, so I'm doing much better, thank you. We never figured out what caused it, but we sure know what fixed it. The transplant went very well, but I got a bad case of shingles right after I had the transplant that really knocked me for a loop. And I've been trying to recover ever since. And this has just been a great way to get back in and start building up.
The first one is I'm aware of the benefit it has overall. And secondly, the specific benefit it is if you have kidney disease, because I have kidney disease and I am diabetic. And I know sufficient information that how good exercise is for that purpose. I would say it helps me not directly manage the kidney disease, but the effects of not having a working kidney. It is surprising that how you learn how many things your kidney actually controls. It controls your hemoglobin, how much phosphate you can take, how much sodium or potassium you can take. And doing that type of exercising and your diet, that really helps.
Prior to transplant, help keep your energy levels up rather than just sitting around and getting worse and worse. It definitely made a difference in keeping things upbeat.
So what we heard from our patient partners is that exercise can really help manage the effects of not having a working kidney. And for Keith, exercise for him specifically helped with his energy levels and mood. And, you know, as our partners noted, the burden of kidney disease really does affect people in so many different ways. And probably more so for those who have established or, you know, kind of later stages kidney disease, especially those who are on dialysis. So when the kidney isn't working well, this can have an impact on muscle strength. In fact, muscle weakness is very common. It can have an effect on your nervous system. So a significant amount of patients have neuropathy, carpal tunnel syndrome, and you know, effects on the brain, which can manifest as things like difficulty sleeping, restless leg syndrome, insomnia, sleep disorders. You know, and for many folks, you know, when they're living with kidney failure, they don't feel like they can really actively fully participate in life's activities because of the symptom burden that's associated with kidney disease. And this in itself can lead to reduced quality of life and then ultimately becoming less active. And the unfortunate part is being less active itself puts people at higher risk of other health conditions like worse controlled blood sugars, blood pressure that's not well controlled. And all of these can then impact on other health complications and increase risk for other processes like cardiovascular disease. So introducing exercise or small bouts of activity can really help reduce the burden of living with kidney disease. Next slide, please. So like our patients in the video experienced, being active can really help to make one feel better with better energy levels and improved mood. And in fact, studies really do support that exercise and activity helps lead to less depression and anxiety, less tiredness and better energy and better sleep. So, some of you might experience some cramping, which is very common in kidney patients and especially common for those on dialysis. And I had one patient who in the last hour of dialysis would develop these horrible cramps and would have to come off the treatment early. And when we realized that this was happening, we introduced our biking program. So while our patient is on dialysis in the last hour of his treatments, he started with 10 minutes. He's now up to a whole 60 minutes with every dialysis treatment. And he swears by it, swears that he feels so much better and hasn't had a single cramp since. So back to you, Nancy.
Thank you. So here's some of the other benefits that come from physical activity. And one of them is blood vessel health. And that means that your vessels remain flexible and they adapt more easily when you're on dialysis. As noted by Jen, that in one gentleman's case, it reduced his cramping, which would have been quite significant. It's also really good at managing your blood sugars. And many people that have diabetes are well aware that exercise is a part of their prescription and it does help them manage their blood sugars. It also helps reduce body fat. And with less body fat, your muscles have a better chance of supporting you and that it's good for your health, obviously. It also lowers your risk of heart disease. It manages your blood pressure and cholesterol. And that's really, really important. If we can help support our body's health by being active, I think it's a nice way, if possible, to avoid medication, but also it super helps with your mental health as well. So being more a lighter mood, being more optimistic, coping better with the stresses that go on. And we know that the more effective that our muscles work, and this is really important. And there is an example of a gentleman that was doing biking on dialysis, and he went from using a walker to walking without anything at all. So we have better strength, we've got better balance, and it reduces falls as well. Next slide, please. This is one that I'm actually quite passionate about because so often people become what we call deconditioned. So when you're not as active as you were before, your muscles aren't getting the exercises that they need. You're not breathing deeply the way you do when you move well. And so by doing a simple exercise such as sit to stand, you're able to strengthen the legs, strengthen your trunk muscles, your back muscles, and increase your mobility and better balance. It certainly makes you safer, but it also builds your confidence and you feel more energized and more likely to do more than you've been doing before. So we know that movement improves your mood. So walking is a really simple one, and it can start very simply as walking to the post box, hopefully outside your home, even walking within the house, even doing small amounts of walking throughout the day all add up to better fitness and a better sense of well-being. Every 1 minute bout are effective. And I think that's a beautiful statement. And I'll give you a good example. I've had a number of injuries over the years, and every time I stood up, the first couple of times it was hard, and then I'd start to add an extra one, and that extra stand would again strengthen my muscles that much more. And the neat part about it is it's a part of every day. So I'm also working within my energy levels at that moment too. Getting outdoors. Oh man, this is one of the simplest things we can do to improve how we feel, your mood, manage your stress, and hopefully reduce some of your anxiety. It can be as simple as going out and sitting on the patio or sitting on your porch, or even opening a window and sitting near the fresh air. So the beautiful thing about it is it's not as hard as it looks. I happen to be very lucky. I live next door or very close to walking paths in Red Deer. And I can go and literally walk, and there's benches right at the very beginning. So I can sit if I need to. If that's as far as I can go that day, that's not a problem. I can take a brief rest and then walk back. The beauty of that particular walking path is it blends, it's got some relatively steep hills in it, but it's also got some flat, and you can work on that whole walking path without going any further. And like I say, for many people, something as simple as sitting outdoors can make a big difference for you. Next slide, please. So now we're going to follow that up with our next patient video. What's your favorite way to be more active? And how do you include activity in your lifestyle? So these are things that you can be thinking as well. What can you do? And what are ways of making it part of your lifestyle? So we can cue the video, please.
My favorite way to be active, I really like swimming, but I've not been able to do that since the advent of starting my peritoneal dialysis, because I didn't want to go into a pool and expose myself that way. So in the interim, I try as much as possible to do a stationary bike at home. I used to go to the gym pretty often, but then the pandemic put an end to that.
My wife and I both love hiking, downhill skiing, cross-country skiing. We snowshoe, and we bike. We're retired, so it's a lot easier for us to be able to go and do different things to stay active and stay in motion. Don't like to sit around. We like to get out and do things.
Well, I'm not particularly bedridden or anything like that. I do a lot of housework. I go out, so that gives me some type of activity all the while, more than actual specific exercise classes, which I enjoy because right now I take part in the KEEP program that Teresa runs.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so how to be more physically active? This is just a great start. So it can be getting out of your chair more often. And the neat thing about that is it really does help your whole body. So you can if you're just at the very early stages, you can do it once or twice. If someone is in a chair and in a wheelchair, and they can move to another chair, even switching from the wheelchair to a dining chair for dinner can make a big difference. If you think about it, that's at least 3 more times a day. So same way as when you're picking something off the floor, do it the first time and pick the item up, and then repeat that activity at least 1 more time. And it's a really neat way. I mean, you got to do it anyway, so why not double up or triple up on it and see if you don't start to feel stronger and start to move more smoothly. Another one for those that drive is parking further away from your medical appointments. And you can start by making it 1 parking spot. As you start to strengthen, you can move it further and further away. And something else to think about is that we know that energy is always an issue. And sometimes it's really hard to get moving because you're tired. And yet the movement itself can start to wake your body up and get you feeling more energized. So if possible, take a bus. Because most of us have to walk to the bus. You're climbing stairs to get onto the bus, and you're sitting to stand while you're on it. So just a simple act of taking the bus or driving a car adds to your strengthening and your movement. Stairs, great activity, certainly great for going up and down. And it was something that in many years ago, or several years ago anyway, when I first started talking to a kinesiologist, I discovered that all the things that I did at work were playing a large role in my level of fitness and my level of conditioning. So I was walking to work, and then I was working, I did work in a hospital, and my office was as far away as it could be from my inpatient unit. So walking the length of the hospital, climbing those stairs, seeing the patient, and then reversing was incredibly valuable. And I think it really helped me in my recovery because I already had a level of fitness to start. For those that have stationary bikes, often people find them quite boring. And one of the ways to get past that is to watch TV while you're doing it. If your bike is set up for it, you can use your laptop or a computer. And those are ways of keeping yourself occupied while you're still getting that exercise done. Biking on dialysis, I think, is the biggest bonus because most of us dialyze 3 days a week anyway. And then therefore you can get 3 days of exercise in while getting your dialysis done at the same time, which I think is a really big bonus. And as Dr. McCrae pointed out, that starting really small is a really great place to be, and then gradually building up as your strength improves. And as noted, even short bouts of activity, they actually do add up. So it's not that you're limiting yourself, that you're only getting 5 minutes several times a day. They actually do accumulate. So you can actually build yourself up to 15 minutes, half an hour or more. And this is something that, again, with Canada having winter weather, being outside isn't always a possibility. So walking the length of the hall, climbing up and down the stairs, moving around your room, tidying, cleaning, all those things pay off as being active, and every little bit you do really does count. So this I believe is Teresa's slide.
This is me, yeah. So what to do next? Talk to your kidney team. So it could be your kidney doctor, it could be the nurses, the social worker, the dietitians. If you have an exercise specialist, or if you don't, advocate for one as well. We're really lucky in Western Canada that we do have exercise specialists, and we do have quite a few group programs, biking programs available. For example, we've got a bike loan program. It's mostly for people on dialysis who can't bike on dialysis. They can loan a bike out for a year or two and use it at home. If you're not in Western Canada or you don't have a specific kidney exercise specialist, there's typically exercise programs that are attached to the health regions or health municipalities for people with chronic diseases. That can always be accessed. Other really great options are your local fitness facility. So it could be run by the municipality. It could be your local YMCA. They typically have exercise programs for people for a wide range of fitness levels. Online classes are out there. YouTube is a really, really excellent resource as well. So if you're looking for sit and be fit or chair yoga, or even like really hard exercise classes for 5 minutes to an hour, they're all available out there. Sometimes you need to kind of sift through it a little bit as well. Next slide, please. So if you can take a picture of this, screenshot it, write down the resources. They should also be posted in the chat as well. But these are some links that are excellent for patients. Couple notable ones is the Global Renal Exercise Group. So if you go onto their website, they'll have an exercise resource page for patients and also for healthcare providers as well. And they have links to recommendations, programs, actual exercise videos in there. Another really good one is the UK Kidney Beam. It is a paid online service, but it is excellent. So they have on-demand videos that you can use whenever. They also have live classes, and they do lots of education as well, specifically for people with kidney disease. Also, if you go into the Manitoba Kidney Health, I believe they have like 3 or 4 videos of actual exercises that are safe. You can do them and you can try them at home. And then I'll just pause maybe a minute or two or a little bit longer so you can write them down, but all really great resources. A lot of the most recent stuff is coming out of the UK. They're the ones who do the Kidney Beam and the My Kidneys and Me as well. Next slide, please. I think this one's Nancy, but what kind of things are holding you back?
So this is a great opportunity to think about those very things that you find tend to get in your way. So I want you to take a minute and think about it, and we can certainly write them in the chat and perhaps write them down for yourself. We're going to talk about a few ways that we can help get past them as well. That we can always find a reason not to. That's the hard part about activity and exercise, is that we can always find our way out of it. So instead of getting out of it, let's look at ways that we can get into it instead. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so there we go. So motivation is a big one. Often we are too tired, we just don't feel up to it, we're just not interested. And I speak from experience. When I was swimming, I had my exercise buddy, and I wonder how often we said to each other, well, if it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't be going swimming today. So it's partly accountability, but it's also partnership. And for many people that exercise together, there's a lot more that goes on than exercise. Lots of good conversation, support if we need it, lots of laughter and fun. And it's also a neat way to be proud of what you're doing. And I think that's really important, is that exercise and activity is something to be proud of. You get a sense of accomplishment, you get things done, including getting some exercise in and feeling better. Fatigue is another big one. And this is where I often suggest that people consider having more than one exercise plan. So if you find that on a particular day you're too tired, and sometimes you really are, that doing Sit and Be Fit, doing some chair yoga, even going back to everyday activities. So getting up and down from a chair, bending over, just taking things a little bit at a time and taking a break in between. And I'll find, for example, that when I'm doing my dialysis prep that I get, and I do a series of baskets. I'm at home, so I do 6 baskets at a time. And sometimes partway through I get tired. So I'll sit down for 15 or 20 minutes, then I'll get back up and continue doing it. And it gets me through it without being exhausted. And I have the accomplishment that I've completed the task. Something to consider is that unfortunately our physicians are not trained as exercise specialists. On the plus side, we do have many people trained as specialists, and our kinesiologists that work within the renal or the kidneys area are fantastic. They work with people of all levels. They have many good ideas, and they're also super great ones to brag to when you've done your exercise, and to support you when you're having trouble, and to help you perhaps build a double exercise program, so a quiet one and a more active one. And I think that's been a brilliant change, particularly in Alberta, that I'm so excited to see them there, and that even Red Deer has access to an exercise specialist, and that's particularly exciting. Sometimes how we think about ourselves in doing exercise, that we compare ourselves to what we did before. Before I was diagnosed with kidney failure, I was skiing, I was backcountry and downhill. I even curled the month before I was diagnosed. I even skipped my curling team to the end. We were last on the roster. We lost, but we certainly had a really good time. And that's another good social one. And with the opportunities, for instance, with curling, that you can use a stick instead of getting down in the hack, that you don't have to sweep every rock. So there's ways of adapting your activity, and potentially just getting started will help your self-doubt to melt away as you realize that you can do more than you think you could. So this is where we look at, again, we talked about expectations and comparisons, and this can be really tough. If you were a super exerciser and now getting out of a chair is the best you can do, it can be really hard on you emotionally. So if we change our expectations a little bit and recognize that you are getting out of the chair and that what you did before was wonderful and you loved it and it's worth the memories that went with it, it really does help you cope a little bit better. The other thing to think about is that very often when we see particularly comparisons on TV, those are people that are healthy. So when we talk about an hour a day, that's a lot. So try and avoid comparing yourself to someone who's not in your same situation. Access to care. So this is, first of all, sometimes we need more assistance than we want. For example, now I've never been a great housekeeper anyway, and gratefully I can afford someone to come and clean my house every couple of weeks. Before that, it was actually an exchange that a friend of mine would come and clean my house and I would do some cooking or baking for her. Other things to look at are finance. Sometimes we'd like to go to a gym, but they're expensive, or we'd like to be able to buy a bike. Be aware that the Kidney Foundation does have funding to support some of these activities, and it's certainly worth asking to find out what's available. And your social worker can also help you with that. Sometimes it's really hard to find that time outside of work to exercise or be more active. And that's where you can look at your job itself. What do you do? In my case, I'm a retired occupational therapist. I was working inpatients and outpatients. So I was on my feet and on the move all day. So that was actually giving me the amount of exercise and activity that I could cope with. So maybe there's ways at work that you could make it different. So if your computer at work is on an adjustable table, you can stand for a time, that you can take the long way around to get a coffee, that you can sit on the edge of your chair, which is really good for balance. So there's ways of incorporating activity into your workload as well. Next slide, please. So our last video, I believe this is it, answers this next question. So what advice would you give someone who is on the fence about starting physical activity? So hopefully you'll get some good ideas from this. So please cue video 3.
First of all, go and appreciate how important it actually is. You've got to have enough sense to know that if it's so significant to the quality of life that you're going to have, that you must do it. You should look at it as something being compulsory and not a fun exercise, although it can be fun if you find a good partner to work with.
Don't hesitate, try it, and see what you'll see the results for yourself.
And this, I believe, is Teresa's.
So talk to your healthcare providers. It might not be an exercise specialist and you might need to ask around. As Nancy was saying, not all doctors or most doctors aren't trained in exercise prescription. So maybe it's the social work, maybe it's the dietitian. Ask questions. So it's like most people will say it is safe to do exercise, but what can you do and what resources are available out there? And also, do they have any suggestions? Because it could be something that you didn't think about. For example, like when you stand up from a chair, stand up again from the chair. And again, advocate for exercise specialists. So people whose job it is to get you moving and to help support you with that. So if somebody has pain or fatigue issues, having somebody who's specifically trained and getting people active with those is really important as well. Next slide, please. I think this one's Jen.
Yep, thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Nancy. So really, hopefully you guys will have heard from us about how we really feel that physical activity is incredibly important for everyone. You know, the thing that you might not have been aware of is that it actually can help with symptom management and actually ultimately result in better quality of life. There are definite benefits outside of the physical effects, but also mental health benefits with physical activity and exercise. And so we really, you know, want all of us to think about how do you build activity and exercise, if you're able to do a structured program, into your lifestyle and into your routine. And the bottom line, honestly, is any movement is really a good thing. And my hope is that more physicians and healthcare providers will really start talking about this more and acknowledge the effects that you can achieve with physical activity and exercise, so that it really does become part of the prescription. It's part of, you know, it can be that magic little pill almost, not quite, but so those are some of our key take-home messages that we really hope you guys can appreciate. And then next slide, please. So again, just to summarize, you heard about a lot of great resources from our exercise specialist, Teresa, but do talk to your healthcare providers and ask them, you know, hey, does our program have an exercise specialist? And remember that if your program doesn't, you can still tap into the chronic disease program, exercise programs, because they usually are available throughout Canada. But if you're really looking for further advice and you'd like to reach out to a kinesiologist or exercise specialist, please note that, our folks in Calgary, Edmonton, and Manitoba have graciously shared their emails to help answer some questions. And then next slide, please. So I just wanted to take a moment to really just thank all the folks who are involved in the production of this presentation and the panel, our patient partners and video partners. You know, thank you to everyone, including our students and a whole host of folks, and especially the Kidney Foundation for putting on this webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, well, thank you very much to Nancy, Teresa, to Jen, and now we're going to move on to the question and answer portion of the webinar. Maybe what we'll start with, we've got just a couple of comments, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit more, maybe all of you actually, maybe from your different perspectives, about mental health and the link a little bit more about how even minimal activity, what is the link between that and mood?
It's huge. So before working in kidney care, I used to work kinesiology with mental health, and the number of people would be like, I just feel so much better from moving, because lots of times mood, you feel it in your body. So you feel fatigue, you feel heavy, maybe you have muscle pains. And then there's also that social part as well. So talking to somebody else, doing something hopefully fun. So if it's a walk or dancing, but I think we really underestimate how impactful physical activity is on mood. Also working in a hospital, if you take someone, put them in a bed for a week and they don't move, they're gonna feel depressed. Like you do that to anyone, regardless of if they have kidney disease. So movement and mood, huge impact.
Okay. What about, can you speak a little bit to, there was just a couple of comments, there weren't specific questions in the Q&A, just about people are really wanting to know more concretely, like how much movement. I mean, you talk about something as simple as standing up and sitting down and picking things off the floor, but really, I think maybe it's just a reiteration, right, that anything is better than nothing, and just moving more over what you were previously doing.
Yeah. So with the guideline physical activity, so what's recommended by the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology, they say like 1 minute bouts. So just like something. So exactly what you were saying, Jen. And then it used to be they said 10 minutes because that's what they had evidence for. But now that's just move. Do what you can. Yeah.
I think specifically with respect to hemodialysis, there is evidence from a recent review that thrice weekly cycling on dialysis for 20 minutes, half an hour was associated with improvements in symptoms of depression. So, I mean, this has been looked at specifically in people on dialysis, and we know you can get the same benefits. And a big part of it too is getting those endorphins going. There's many different ways it could potentially work. The endorphins are one way. The other way is just very much a feeling of having achieved something, self-efficacy, reframing. There's many different ways. So finding out what works for you is interesting and exciting.
Thanks. This is Dr. Stephanie Thompson. Just people wondering who popped in here. So thank you.
Who's dispensing advice? Yeah, I'm one of the nephrologists in Edmonton, and we have an exercise program up here as well, just like the South in Winnipeg. So glad to be here.
Thank you. No, that's wonderful. So just another question here, again about somebody from from Alberta Kidney Care South, but from one of the southern units, just wondering why you talked a lot about bikes. So people asking about bikes and about access to people in different areas, probably, again, it's across Canada, specifically about exercise bikes for patient in beds, as an example that they have in Winnipeg. So maybe just speaking a little bit about, I suppose, access to programs and equipment.
I guess I can start and then others jump in. So we actually, I'm not aware of a modified bike that we're using for beds in our program, except for perhaps in the inpatient world. And Teresa could probably chat about that. But
So,
go for it, Teresa.
We have 2 bed bikes in Calgary. We went through a whole process to design a specific bed bike. We were so excited. They spent years on it. And then we went to order more, and that company went under. They said we had to order a minimum of 50 bed bikes. And so the last bed bike that we made, I actually got my mother, who's a retired engineer, to hackshaw a couple bikes together to make one for PLC, but it's definitely something that we want. We hear it from patients that we want it as well. So if anybody has any leads, suggestions, comments, please email me and let us know.
And Stephanie, in the AKC North, do you folks have access to a bed bike?
No, we don't. We tried to get one. And as well, it's just the supply demand that's going on for just about everything worldwide. But I would also say, like in the years prior, there's a lot of interesting thoughts about bed bikes, you know, and I think that for people working in the units, they may not be as comfortable with the concept of bed bikes. It's like, well, if you're well enough to bike, you should be well enough to sit in a chair, and this sort of very rigid thinking that we are trying to change, because I think some people can't, some people are more comfortable in a bed, and why not try to rehabilitate while you're laying down? So there are these other issues too that have sort of held us back in terms of advancing, like bed bikes. But we did try, particularly for our PEDS people, we wanted to get one, but it's been very hard finding a manufacturer.
Okay, thank you. So question here, with cold weather coming, is using a QB, I don't know what that is, sufficient as an alternative to walking outside? So if there's no room for a stationary bike, so I imagine that's the small bike, right?
Do you want me to take this one? Yes, absolutely. You can walk in your house, YouTube. I had a patient tell me that they did a walk a mile on YouTube. So they put on their YouTube channel and you just like march in place around your living room. My patients who have QBs love them. And I would say when we do get those Chinooks, if you're here in Calgary and it's nice outside, go outside. But anything, just any mobility is excellent.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's sort of most everything. I kind of combined a couple of things about mood. Someone did make a really good point that their mood is always better after exercise. And I think that's a really good takeaway about that as well. One person though, maybe Jen or Stephanie can speak to this. People were talking about barriers to exercise, and someone commented that swelling and fluid retention are things that can be a barrier to moving. Can you speak a little bit about that and how they can help overcome that barrier?
Yeah, so I can try, and then Jen, you can add for sure. So certainly we would say if you're have so much fluid accumulation that you don't feel well and you feel short of breath, you should not exercise. But if it's the sensation that, you just feel heavy and sort of bloated and just not wanting to move, actually things like walking or cycling where you are promoting sort of blood return to your heart and fluid movement can be beneficial. The key there is just keeping it in an intensity where you could talk to somebody else. So, mild to moderate, you could get your sentences out and your breathing is not too heavy. But generally, it's actually something that makes people feel a bit better if they're not having symptoms like respiratory symptoms from the fluid. And it's just something that they can see but don't like. It can actually be helpful. And, we have people come into dialysis who've gained, 3 kilos, for example, 4 kilos, and their blood pressures are okay though, and they're not short of breath, they will still cycle. So just because the fluid's there doesn't mean that you cannot do anything. The thing is, if you do feel unwell or can't catch your breath, certainly you would not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would totally echo that. Definitely was thinking that it helps with the mobilizing the fluid and bringing the fluid back into the circulation away from, the ankles and the legs. And absolutely agree, Stephanie. Some people have lots and lots of extra fluid on board when they come to the dialysis unit, and we have them bike and helps them tolerate the dialysis procedure a little bit more gently. So yeah, I don't think having fluid is a contraindication at all to exercise, but just be aware of your limits and just, and slowly work on improving your endurance. I don't know if Nancy maybe has some other thoughts on this too.
Well, and that's, especially lower leg edema responds really well to biking, but it also responds to walking and ankle exercises in a chair, even marching in place or marching while you're in a chair really makes a difference. And part of it is literally getting that fluid moving, that when we tend to sit for a long time, especially for kidney patients, that for some people, they do swell up. And that's the important part about getting out of that chair and moving so that your muscles are actually forcing that fluid around and potentially reducing it as well. There was a comment in the chat room about a patient that had really improved her swelling by biking on dialysis. And so definitely manageable and certainly encouraged to do as much as you can comfortably. Thanks.
And someone else has said as well, another barrier or issue to contend with is balance. So obviously that's an element to keep into consideration to be safe while exercising as well. Question though, I had just threw out the one of our Q&A questions about asking if a QB is sufficient as an alternative. And maybe Teresa, you can explain what a QB is.
Not sponsored, but if they want to sponsor me, they can. It's a little tiny kind of elliptical bike. So I would say they are fairly expensive for what you get. They're around $400 to $500, and it's a little elliptical. It's very small, lots of ankle movement. There are other options out there. So for a while, there was a shortage on all exercise equipment because everybody was doing home gyms. But now if you look at like Kijiji, Amazon, marketplaces. So little tiny bikes that you can put at the base of a chair and then you can cycle while you're watching TV. It's pretty gentle. But yeah, QBs are great. I have patients who tell me to tell everyone to get a QB, and I'm like, I can't tell everyone to get a QB, but they are pretty great tools.
How do you spell that, Teresa? Can you add it to the chat?
Oh, I will. I'll
Okay.
put it in.
Thank you. That is the last of our questions. So let me just move on here we do have some other resources, of course, that we have been posting all along. And I just want to remind people that if you haven't had a chance to, take a picture with your phone or copy things down, that this recording will be available and you'll be able to see all of the links after the fact as well. The Kidney Foundation is committed to providing information and educational resources about kidneys and kidney disease. So we invite you to visit the Kidney Community Kitchen for recipes, information, and tools to help you manage your renal diet. Through our regional branch offices, we offer advice and support about accessing services within the healthcare system and in the community. And the Kidney Foundation remains committed to providing the information you need to protect your kidneys and to live well with any stage of kidney disease. We invite you to contact your local branch of the Kidney Foundation if you have further questions, or to speak to someone in your community about all of these resources and educational materials. So I would like to thank everyone once again, to our panelists, to everyone who attended for this Movement is Medicine Tips for People Living with Kidney Disease webinar.